Photosynthesis literally means create with light. So photo means light, right? And then synthesis, to create, okay, or to build. So what happens during photosynthesis is that plants and algae and some photosynthetic bacteria use energy from the sun, and create sugars, create food for themselves. So this happens in autotrophs. You might remember that word from earlier. Autotrophs, self-feeders. And in photosynthesis in plants, which is what we normally think of, this process occurs in the leaves of the plants. In the leaves of plants and in the cells of algae, we find the chloroplast. Okay? And chloroplast, right up here, organelle, that has two membranes. So you can see an inner membrane and an outer membrane. So it's a double membrane bound organelle. And then inside those membranes, we have these thylakoids, which are these little stacks. And you can see them over here in this electron microscope image, all of these little stacks of little mini membranes. And then we also have a clear fluid, the stroma. What's special about the chloroplast is this is the site of photosynthesis in eukaryotic organisms, and inside the thylakoid membrane, we have a special pigment, chlorophyll. And chlorophyll is what gives plants and other photosynthetic organisms their green color, because chlorophyll as a pigment reflects green light, so that's what we see, and it absorbs reds and blues and violets, and it uses that light energy that's absorbed by the chlorophyll. That's what's going to power the reaction that creates sugars. Let's look at what happens there. So the plant uses, or the photosynthetic organism, is able to take in carbon dioxide, okay, or CO2. Okay, so it uses 6 carbon dioxide molecules and 6 water molecules. And it's going to use this and use energy in the form of light to create, to build a single glucose molecule, C6H12O6, and then oxygen is also produced, and oxygen is released as a waste product. So oftentimes people think that, oh, the goal of photosynthesis is to create oxygen, but that's not the case. It's a wonderful byproduct, it benefits us greatly, but the goal of photosynthesis, right, from a plant's perspective, is to create glucose. And that glucose is very important for us because it's the basis for everything we eat. So what's actually happening inside the chloroplast, if we just go through this diagram here and we'll find our reactants and products. Okay? So light energy is a reactant, right? Light energy and water are used right away, and they are taken in. The light is absorbed by the chlorophyll, the water enters the plant and goes up to the leaves, goes into the cells, into the chloroplast, and then from that we have what's called the light reaction. So that's the first thing that happens, the light reactions. The light reactions produces these two little intermediary products, ATP, which we're familiar with, right? So that light energy is being converted into chemical energy, ATP, and NADPH. Those are going to be used in the second step, the Calvin cycle. Also produced from the light reactions is our oxygen, so one of our products, right? The oxygen just gets released through the stroma in the leaves of the plants into the atmosphere. Back to that ATP and NADPH right here, okay? So the ATP and NADPH are going to be used in the second phase, the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle is where the carbon dioxide is used. So plants absorb carbon dioxide through the stroma in their leaves, and then that carbon dioxide and the ATP and NADPH are used to make our sugars, our glucose, sucrose, etc. And then the plant will either use the sugars right away in cellular respiration, or will store those sugars for a longer term storage, like so they can survive the winter, for example, when they lose their leaves and can no longer make more sugars, at least up here in the northern hemisphere. So that is an overview of photosynthesis. Definitely be familiar with this equation right up here, okay? And remember that the goal of photosynthesis, the goal is to produce glucose.